It's Sunday, which means it's recap time here on the Retirement Quick Tips podcast. The theme this week was the ultimate guide to RMDs in 2024. And in case you missed any of the episodes, here's what I talked about each week. I talked about basics, understanding the basics, how RMDs work, when you start, what the taxes look like, which accounts are subject to RMDs, etc. There's just a lot of nuances and things that are overly complicated with IRAs, 401ks, and what's those required distributions once you reach that age. And so I covered that in the very first episode of the week where we kind of dove in on Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, I talked about how to calculate your RMDs, your tax withholding amount. I talked about RMD aggregation rules where you can combine multiple accounts together and the overly complicated rules with which accounts can and can't be combined together. I also talked about what you need to know in the very first year that you're taking your RMD. And then I also related to that in Friday's episode, I talked about timing your RMD distributions and why, if you can, you want to wait until maybe later in the year to do that. And then yesterday, I talked about how to reduce your RMDs, some strategies, things that you want to do years often in advance to keep your RMDs lower and keep the taxes lower as a result. So you do have a few options. You have more options if you do advanced planning years in advance. So even if you're not yet at the RMD age where that's required, it's important to understand the rules, how RMDs work, so that you can implement some of these planning strategies that can really help to reduce those RMDs later on down the road once they're required. And I would say that is one of the most important takeaways from this week is just understanding that you can plan for this and you should plan for your RMDs years out, not the year that your RMDs start. The other takeaway is that RMDs can be complicated and there's a lot to know and figure out. I try to cover everything I could possibly think of related to RMDs. So if you listened throughout the week, hopefully you have a much better understanding now than you did on Monday when we started covering this. It's complicated and there's a lot of questions leading up to it, but then once you kind of get going, you figure out, okay, I'm going to take a monthly distribution or a lump sum. I'm going to withhold this much in taxes. You understand who's going to calculate those for you and what the amount is. And hopefully you've consolidated and simplified your accounts into one or at most two financial institutions. So you don't have tons of different RMDs from all over the place. Those are the things that kind of need to happen in the first year or leading up to the RMDs. But then once you get going, more or less, it can be on autopilot. And there's not a whole lot you need to do each year other than just recalculating your distribution, reviewing your tax withholding, and then making sure you're updating that withdrawal amount to ensure that you take out your full RMD so you're not penalized on missing any RMD amounts. So it seems complicated, but again, once you get going, it's not too bad. And the key is the advanced planning. And I would say that that's the most important takeaway from this week. Get your ducks in a row, do some planning, do some Roth conversions if that makes sense to reduce your RMDs. You have lots of options, but you run out of options once you hit that RMD age, or I should say your options become much more limited. Tomorrow, I'm starting a brand new theme. I'm reading What Your Money Means. I actually intended to do it this week as the theme, but I was in Idaho on vacation with my kids. We were camping. I thought I was going to have all kinds of downtime in the evenings to read. Was I wrong? No, my kids, they ran me ragged. It was a lot of fun. We went to Silverwood, which if you've ever heard of it's a theme park in northern Idaho, and I was exhausted and had zero time to read. So anyways, I'm still finishing up that book, but I'm really enjoying it, and I'm going to talk about it in next week's theme. It's What Your Money Means and How to Use It Well by Frank Hanna. It's a completely different take on money. Most books are about how to maximize, how to grow your wealth, how to make as much money as possible. And this one's not. And I'll talk more about that next week. But it's still, I think, just as, if not more important, to hear this side of it as well. All right. Thank you so much for listening this week. If you're enjoying the podcast, please share the show. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And if you're interested in learning more about working with me, you can check out my website, truenorthra.com. There's a link there on the homepage to schedule a 15-minute call with me, and we can talk about whatever is on your mind regarding your retirement and see if it might make sense for us to continue the conversation. Thank you so much for sharing the love and spreading the word. I hope you have a blessed Sunday. My name is Ashley Michike, and this is the Retirement Quick Tips Podcast.